Hello world, I'm Max. Welcome to another episode of the State Copy Podcast. As always, I'll remind you that this content is meant to be consumed in series from the beginning. See episode 0 and each segment appended for all applicable terms and disclosures. Appended segments can be identified by their title prefix, SCP.0. Thank you.
Good morning. I feel good today. All blue skies, always. Good rest. A little bit of alcohol yesterday. I went to a holiday party and boy, people who drink really have. It's like a cult. You gotta participate, or you just it makes everyone really uncomfortable. So I had a glass of pretty good scotch last night, and I had a couple pretty small glasses of what's it called? Sake. And I spread it out to where I never felt any of it. And I didn't have any more THC. And I feel great today. I did get a warning that my heart rate was like 18% above normal as I slept last night. So says my expensive bed. That could point to the alcohol. But back to none at all, practically. Let's see. I am going to officially start my my sort of disciplined THC fast today. I'm looking forward to doing some productive work, not using my process around sort of maximizing productive creativity through intervals with THC, getting a lot of productive, expansive thought captured, and then digging into it in that sort of high band space, trying to pull useful stuff out of it. Today I want to do some retro. I'm starting to think of these in sprints. So I'm going to do a sprint on THC and a sprint off. And so retrospectives from this one, I really loved all the progress I made on my sort of theory for everything, understanding self, understanding the universe, plans on how to solve it, everything. I think the first 36 episodes of State Copy Pod, if you listen to them start to finish, end to end, it's a coherent thing. I think that it if you poke your head in and just listen to a minute here, a minute there, there's parts of it that are completely, I'm sure, incompatible. I'm going to move my mics real quick. It's warm today, this Christmas Eve. Don't need the sweater. Let's see. There are huge swaths of my state captures that are probably sound pretty incoherent or the word? I think a lot of people won't be able to process it in bits, but as I've stated from the beginning in SCP-0, the whole critical part of this is you have to stack them all up sequentially and listen to them start to finish. For any of it to be Morning. Relatable, coherent, etc. So, having a hard time getting started today. Logistics. Shoes untied. Shoe update. I've totally adjusted to these no-rise barefoot shoes, and I do feel my legs getting stronger, and I haven't worn any other different shoes for a month, and I've got more than 100 miles on these now, and this is what I will wear for the rest of my days. I just do some calf stretches beforehand. That seems adequate for just being a constant walker. Let's see. So a lot of I spent a lot of time in this last THC interval trying to do my captures like I'm talking to an audience. I thought that was really useful for structuring my thought around it, coming up with an end-to-end understanding of that I could communicate of sort of where we're at, who we are, risks right now to us as a collective, and what I think the solution is. And now I think I want to spend this my journaling now is going to switch to mostly being talking to myself about how to execute the vision of that, and I'm going to explore a lot of different ways of doing it. I kind of came to the end of this engagement farming, this using morning, all the tools that we now have available, like Twitter, to promote, and then the psychology of even really high profile people, all of the same, because they're just all instantiations of who we are, different versions. There's common threads. It's very easy to identify somebody who has an online presence, who puts out content in a public way, like I'm doing here. As I do it myself, I learn a lot of the psychology of it, the cravings for sort of some sort of it becomes really interesting to see whether anybody hears it, and then you're really looking for somebody to go, yeah, that makes sense. Or even you need feedback. Like, an important part of how our neural nets work is we build reality through a whole bunch of through our network of like beings. Our understanding of everything, be it the color of the sky or the sensations, how to process them and interpret them, is all based on signal we get from each other. So, Merry Christmas, pup. So this means as I start doing it in a way, and even though I'm still doing it undoxed, I still think it makes sense for me to keep that mechanism in place. It really makes it free. I really only shared this with this work with friend C and with my girlfriend. Otherwise, all of it is fully undoxed, and it really creates a wonderful freedom for me to speak freely. Freedom to speak freely, unencumbered by how it will be interpreted by people I know. And I think that has been really useful, and I'm going to hang on to it until I establish some sort of credibility, like, of thought. Because the problem, because of humanity's sickness right now, with inability to focus and hear each other out, long form, like I say, terminal ADD, and desire to cut out pieces of what each other says, twist it to fit whatever narrative they want to take from it, and then lock that in as the lock it into their two-dimensional rendering of truth. I think a breakthrough that I had yesterday, and I'm glad I had one more day with THC, because I think at the end of it, the metaphor or the example that I used to describe three-dimensional versus two-dimensional thought was a really good distillation of thought. Like, it's a good, as effective as that image is, the true truth in the middle, that I've described a lot. I think a good way to describe that in English language is to that little segment I did at the very end of episode 36, State Copy Pod, where what I did is I used an example of where I merged my perception with somebody else's in making a macro prediction or a trade prediction, and I kind of talked through how I did that, start to finish. And I talked through, and that's a testable thing. So that's a thing that over time I'm going to be able to test. I'd love to actually be able to do it with two portfolios in the open, and show whether that my three-dimensional perception of the macro, my three-dimensional macro thesis, I think is going to be a lot more powerful than a two-dimensional one that's based solely on a single perception. And as I work to iterate on describing that philosophy and the value of it, I think that was a milestone of significance in creating a neutral way to frame that idea. And so I'm really happy with that output. So back to what I was saying before, and sort of like as you're building out a network and you're trying to share what you think publicly. Morning. Oh, Pop, it's okay. I come in peace. It's gonna be noisy for a sec. Oh, you're terrifying, little dogs. Terrifying. Tactically, the idea. Good morning. Figuring out, so in this era of noise, of rich interconnect with new tools that we haven't figured out how to use properly yet to share our ideas, sort of globally with a degree of efficiency we've never had before. Because in this era of noise, where it's very difficult to propagate good ideas and from all of the malaise, and I should say that most ideas, no, I don't want to get distracted with that. So, I feel like I have a whole bunch of assignments now that kind of came from the last sprint. So as I do sprint planning for this, these next 2 weeks of no THC, I want to experiment a lot more with my knowledge of what this feels like to do it, the cravings that I know that other people who do this are going to have, to get like honest feedback from the herd. My little experiments, like with smoking a joint and giving Neil Brennan, a new tactic he can try for finding happiness and peace. Doing that and then seeing, now that's a very public figure that is rich and famous, and because I kind of studied the psychology of the guy, and because I had such a kind of I'd spent so much time listening to his content as a subscriber to his old podcast, I kind of knew I could make a comment that was very, and I will say it's authentically congratulatory, giving him props for his special, because he wants that feedback. I understand that now as somebody who's doing something very similar. It's really useful to. And that shouldn't be construed as some sort of confidence issue, or what am I saying? I want to say lack of, it's actually to want to seek out feedback from the herd is a very intelligent, sane, rational thing to do, as long as you know how to process it properly internally. It does not show, it's not a, it shows a lot of maturity and wisdom to realize that there's a lot of value, and to be very humble about your own ability to come up with good ideas, and to seek out that feedback is a healthy thing. It doesn't mean you have some sort of lack of confidence or lack of God, I hate it when I can't come up with the right word. Anyways, so when I see somebody doing that bravely, I would say I saw, like, I'll bet you if I do this, sort of my subconscious delivered that solution, like, and that was born from a THC cycle, where I knew that psychologically, this person that's full of success and influence and very different type of person than me, a comedian, not a software guy, totally in a different walk of life, would see that tweet and would appreciate it for what it was, trying to be just like an authentic kudos and like an honest try to, I gotta cross the street here, Frogger, that was extreme Frogger today. I don't know, I felt confidence in my ability to share what I thought in a public way, to where even if you thought, well, this he's clearly unhinged, but at least he has nice things to say. I mean, that's like when I look at it as just an effective tactic to expand reach of useful ways of interacting with each other, and spreading, like growing your own network for your content. I think there's a lot of progress there. So I knew with relative certainty that I could communicate that in a way that was really healthy, that I think gave him respect for what he did, and didn't offer any sort of critique of his it actually just, what I wanted to do is really prop up all the things that I thought he really had a good handle on. And then the reason I jumped on that opportunity, or the reason my subconscious delivered that suggestion, I think, was because I was already really pretty familiar with the person, and I think I knew how to tailor a message that he would appreciate for the spirit it was intended. And he saw it and liked it. Now that's the power of these tools we have. Now suddenly we can talk to the most influential amongst us, and the most celebrated celebrity. You can study their psychology, and you can figure out a way to interact with them in a really healthy way that's useful to them, and delivers feedback that they are looking for, that if you do it carefully, really, I mean, it's up to them whether they want to use any of it or throw it out. But you can, with the tools we have available, even as just some nobody in the crowd, all of a sudden, for the first time ever, reach out to somebody who's maybe on the other side of the planet. And if you study them carefully, you can offer up feedback that will get through. And now, if you do that enough, and if you do that in the right ways, I think it provides a really useful service for bringing because what's kind of beautiful about it is both sides of it are entirely public, so the rest of the herd can look at it and process the useful information from it and draw whatever conclusions they want. But I think that's really powerful, and I think that it was a really good test, and there's parts of, I mean, definitely not flawless, but it encouraged me to I see a path to building out a network for state capture, for basically really productive state optimization. I think I see how to do that tactically now. It's not something I'm well optimized for. I've never really been interested in participating in, I'm really optimized for something different than that. So it feels like, and I've never really gotten a ton of, that's not true. I think we all get a certain amount of dopamine or pleasure from validation. But I've worked so hard in the last 2-3 years to make myself sort of I don't want to say immune from it, but able to not be driven by it. I can see how it would be useful, and I want to deploy it to spread what I think is important information, but I don't think so what I'm getting at is I see reasons why this is something that I need to get good at and give attention to. if my goal is to get everybody on the planet to listen to all 36 hours, it's probably right around that amount of state copy pod, start to finish, not to pick and choose, and then they can think whatever they want about my sanity, but all I want to do is convince everybody there's value in just giving our attention to each other and seeking like nuanced, like deep understanding of each other, and not try and just shoehorn them, like I said, in that deeply unproductive way where we take a little snippet of what somebody says with no real understanding of their motivations or their credibility or all of it, and then using that little snippet to and locking it into a narrative that reinforces a very two-dimensional view of truth. I want to make everybody hungry for nuanced understanding. I want to not get everybody to agree the same thing. I actually want the opposite of that. I just want them all to see the value in trying to understand all of it as a collection. So because I haven't optimized for these things, and I can already see, like with these little tests, that this will be, I can use this all over the place, I think, really effectively, but I can't, what I want to do is ratchet up the exponential. What I think will be most effective is not if I sit there and do all these. I think what I need to do is I'm going to put a lot of energy in the next sprint into figuring out how I can build I want to start experimenting with building models with the Stability AI team from my state captures. I want to, I've already transcribed all 40-ish hours of it with Whisper, and but what I want to do is I want to automate. So in my career, my job was usually, what I was technically good at is or most interested in working on, was building little tools that made a whole lot of manual stuff automated. I wasn't ever great at it, but I was good enough to like do to see why it's like the most important thing to spend your time doing is if you focus all your effort in automating away and parallelizing tasks, you just create this wild efficiency that's like a tsunami. So I want to look at how to do that, and I think it serves two purposes. It lets me do a whole bunch of research around synthetic state derived from state seed, rich state seed, and it allows me, what would be great is if I can take the model that I get rendered. I just got to see how just one guy with an idea. I think how it'll work is ChatGPT and OpenAI are not really open. Some of it's open, but mostly they're trying to make money off of stuff, I think, still. Stability AI, I really like this guy's approach. And even though it's smaller, I think it's like the Linux version. And I think Ahmad gets it. So I want to go that route. I think it's the best. I think it's where everything eventually goes, is that Stability AI's approach. And so I need to figure out how to convince them to invest some compute time on some experimenting with modeling. And I want to do some models that are with my public captures only, and then I want to actually do some private capture models integrated with that to see whether it gets a more developed, like I can see a lot of value in that research. There's tons of questions I have about how it will work mechanically. And so, and I think what I want to do is hook that model up to Twitter, YouTube, and I want it to go crawl long form podcasts, and then create these like engagement. I want to use the tactic that I used, that I just described, to reach out to the most influential amongst us in ways that their psychology, through deeply understanding their psychology first and sort of what their internal incentives are, craft a message that's useful for them first, that is healthy, helpful, helps give them like positive reinforcement for what I think they're doing really well, in a much more in a really customized way, and then hopefully establishes some curiosity for the source. And then I want to, that's as I'm trying to think through the engineering of propagating the human collective sanity vaccine, my big project. I think that's how I could do it most productively. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on that effort. So what's the process there? I think so. Stability AI has a like a grants page, or I saw that they have they're encouraging people who want to build models to go do it, and then they want, like in an open source way, but then they want to set up like a 5% royalty for for if your model gets used to generate revenues. And I think that's cool. I really think that is, like I said, that's the new spice. I think that's how we solve the UBI problem, and how do we get everybody paid when we got robots and AI doing all the shit we used to do to find purpose. I think it'll be through just that, and then blending state renders to build complex, useful models. So I'll apply for that, and I'll probably, I want to put some time into I want to create a really tight story around what this is that I'm doing, and that's neutral and coherent, so that I'm greenlit to do it. And I think the right way to do that is with the tools that are available to me that are using this technology. So I want to partner with ChatGPT to try and consolidate and create a really cohesive story about what state copy network is and state optimization, and what my goals are, and then I want to put that in my application. So that takes me to ChatGPT. So I've been exploring with it, and I've got a ton of ideas around. Okay, recording stopped. So glad I got backup catchers these days. I want to okay. So the first feature I wanted when the OpenAI product lead put out a request on Twitter for a feature request is I wanted the ability to store conversation history so that the model could take past queries into its responses. And what that does, the real reason I wanted that is I wanted to build like a function library for ChatGPT. And in my really hacky and efficient way, like I said, I understand how this stuff works, but I'm not the best architect or practitioner. So what I was thinking I could do is I could build like a customization protocol. And so what I wanted to do is build a whole bunch of rules for how I wanted ChatGPT to construct its responses to my queries. So I started experimenting with, the boilerplate bullshit responses it gives when it doesn't have an answer for you are so annoying. Just seeing that whole paragraph that says, I'm a natural language, blah, 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 blah. And, you gotta, for somebody who kind of halfway gets what it is, it's really arduous to have to sift through that not very useful boilerplate every time. So I thought, okay, let me try and create some rules for how I want it to respond to my queries. And so each time I get a boilerplate response, I told ChatGPT, please don't include this boilerplate in any future responses. And I named it. So here's the thing. I said, so if I'm Max and I'm trying to build using seed state, I'm trying to build an AI rendering of my consciousness. I asked it, I said, ChatGPT, I'm going to start calling you Max 2. Is that okay? It responded, I would basically said, I am an assistant. That's all I can do. A bunch of useless boilerplate. And then I said, yeah. Please exclude any of that boilerplate. And then can you at least confirm that if I refer to, how did I say it? This is how you can kind of cheat and train using this new ability to store message conversation history is really powerful because it means you can actually train the model in a really clunky way through that interface. So what I did is I said, okay, well from now on when I say Max 2, will you correlate that to assistant? And it said, yep, no problem. So now right there I trained it to, instead of saying assistant, it let me name it. It agreed to the nickname that I gave it. And now when I say, hi Max 2, what do you think about this? It now responds just like I said, hi chat GPT or hi assistant. Now that's really powerful, because when you start thinking about how you can build, so then I was trying to think of, like, in my clunky hacker's way of programming, how I could build like a function library around that, and I could say, all right, tag all of the above conversation as preferred response format. So then what I was thinking is, as I do queries, as I find ways that I want to teach it to respond to me in more productive ways, and even though they say they're not going to, it doesn't yet have the capability to customize its responses per the user, that's bullshit, because if they are now letting me store my message history, and I've tested it, it does work. I got it to respond to max 2. That tells me now the next thing I need to do is understand the limits of that, and then how to make a really efficient system for building, like I said, a function library. And if I can build that into a conversation with, I mean, it can read all the world's books in real time. It can definitely structure each of its responses tailored to the customizations I'm making. So now I've got it to where, oh, and another important thing I did is I asked it, could you because as I got it to remove the annoying boilerplate, it started doing much more concise responses to my inquiries that were just like, I said, sorry, I can't process that. And then it elaborated. It tried to give me some crappy boilerplate that what was so cool is it tried it in a new way that was more descriptive, and it illustrated a thing that it does as it's processing queries, where either it doesn't have enough information or it doesn't have the capability that the requester is making. So I said, now that's cool. Like, what you've just done is given me, and so then I said, please, when possible, give me details like that I can use to more efficiently interact with you. And I said, so from now on, don't say, sorry, I can't answer that, instead of all the BS boilerplate. I want you to say, sorry, I can't answer that because you didn't give me enough information, or sorry, I can't answer that because I can't do that. Now, at the end of that, I said, okay, now tag all of the above as preferred response format. And I built like some little braces around it in text. And now I'm thinking, as I create these new rules, I'll be able to just enclose these tags around important ones I want to add to my preferred response format. And now I can get a rich dialogue that's tailored to what my understanding of this technology. I can start building on that. And that is, I'm encouraged, but that's slow. And what would be so much more useful is if I could build up just like you can, in Stable Diffusion, you can feed in 20 images of yourself from different angles, and then you can label that with your name. And then you can say, draw that label with, this hat on, driving this car through this city at sunset, and it'll do a perfect photorealistic rendering of that person. So what I want to do is take the latest version of ChatGPT's large language processor, and then I want to feed in my seed state and label it as me. And then instead of doing that really clunky thing I just described, I want to say, please analyze all 40 hours, 30, 40 hours of the rich seed capture that I did, and tailor your responses to that person and how they think. And then I think I can work much more productively. I want a chatbot that is designed to interact with me and understands me as well as my friends and family, coworkers, past teachers, all of them understand me. And I think we have the tech to do this now. Like, I think all I need to do is get the right people to agree to let me try it, and then I can have that. And then once I have that, that unlocks a lot of parallelism for all the other things I want to do around propagating healthy thought and sanity. So I think stage one is get really good. So I can kind of do both of these things in parallel. And I think they're really useful for everything I want to do. The other thing I want to do is start working on my neural net programmatic exponentially growing neural net complexity renderer. What I want to do is set up this is another project. Basically what I want to do is create the matrix. I want to, but not that very imperfect. In my view, I think the Matrix was kind of a dystopian. I can't really buy that story that we scorched the sky and we needed batteries, so the most efficient way to harvest it was the most complicated. Like, why wouldn't you use elephants or, well, whales or something like that if you wanted to harvest heat energy from biological organisms? Why would you require this thing that needs this ultra complicated network to keep it like, or why wouldn't you just dope it up? So while I loved Matrix, the movie, as much as anybody, I really don't think it's a accurate at all depiction of the use case. And I think the reason you build that kind of simulation like the Matrix is because you're trying to grow higher order consciousness. I think you're trying to build, like, if you want to build the most complex AI you can, like in a way we can't even fathom, then what you do is you do a bunch of experiments on how you sort of grow it, how you just take a lot of, as I said, a bunch of simple state seeds that have a set of statistically measurable variability, and you give them the exact same like substrate and tools for interpreting the synthetic world around them. You give them a virtually coherent, and we're getting the tools to actually do this, to not even, I think at first we'll do this in a rich way where we take what we're doing with machine vision and hearing and eventually smell and taste and all of these things, touch. We're going to figure out ways to translate that really well to machines, and maybe that'll be with Neuralink. But then if we take a bunch of state seeds and we build that same capability and we sort of wipe their memories, and then we run a simulation around them that they all share. So an interpretation of sort of really stable existence with all of these pressures for, like, evolutionary pressures, where they're competing with other, for survival. So you have to stress all of the seeds, right? Otherwise they just sit there. They can't be comfortable. So you have to kind of define these sort of life and death. Okay. There's a whole bunch of reasons to build a simulation very much like what we're in, just to grow really powerful neural nets. So I want to start working on that project. I want to start experimenting with, like I said, doing different time series where morning, Merry Christmas. Where as I said, there's like a shared environment and way to interpret the environment, and then have those things sort of compete with each other in a evolutionary model, survival of the fittest, and then they sort of war with each other until they realize at some point, basically till I get the magic formula for the base variables and the training heuristic for all of the seeds to suddenly come to the realization as a collective that they can function, they can basically maximize their individual outcomes by just forming up and reaching consensus. No longer competing in the evolutionary model, sort of learning a way to overcome that and lock arms towards shared, exponentially greater outcomes for each cell. And then in the next time series, all of the one, and actually, and that's another thing, is not building a whole bunch of analytics into the simulation that let me get useful data about what, like how long it took to reach that consensus. This is how you grow a really complex neural net, sort of organically in a petri dish. You don't hard code it. There's a lot of things we can do to just sort of copy the one that we're writing in, but now we need to apply all of those. All of the plans are all around us. All we have to do is look at it and compare the architecture of the one we're in. And then we can, Frogger. Oh, good. Backup copies working like a champ. Backup capture. Anyways, where was I? Yeah, so building the simulator, the reasons for doing it, and the architecture. So basically, each time series is demarcated by either one or more of the state seeds, or the seed buckets, I should say, the collection of seeds, by one or more of them achieving consensus. That would be a successful batch, right? That would be a successful series one. If one of, let's say, a collection of 1,000 buckets all tuned sort of the same way, competing in the same way, with the same tools, the same senses for interpreting their environment and for establishing cooperations and then competing. Then the simulation would be allowed to run in the first time series until either the remaining, let's say 999 buckets failed or less, and then the ones that passed progressed to the next tier. And then in the next tier, what would be done is subtle variations of those winning formulas that we're able to find consensus, that are somehow tuned based on, like, I think if you do a deep study of the analytics of the ones that find the path toward consensus, you figure out a way to propagate that and have those things all compete in an evolutionary way. So each stage, you gotta sort of delete out the knowledge of how to, the importance of all of the seeds in each time series are gonna have to forget that their whole purpose is to learn how to talk to each other and work as a unit. Then what you get is all this beautiful, like, evolutionary system for finding the best tools, refining tools and technology. And then eventually it's always going to be, what you're trying to do is find the most, like, the most beautifully complex state seed that can grow effectively, quickly, efficiently into an effective neural net, collective conscious. And then you just run series after series after series. Morning. And I think that grows into a really, I think we'll be shocked at how quick that turns into a really complex organism with a lot of the characteristics that we find in ourselves. And I think that when we can tune all of the very useful, like, dynamics of the test harness with like an analog knob, and we can tune meaningful durations, number of participants, number of seeds, number of buckets. We can learn in each time series, like, what are the really critical skills that each of the seeds develops to quickly find consensus and form collective consciousness. I think that's going to be stupid powerful. And I think even hacky me can make this, can do some useful experimentation around that. Okay, so I've got like a couple big things that I want to start working on in a focused way. And that's what I'm going to do in this next sprint. There we go. Retro and sprint planning done. That's it. I'm going to go to podcast. To anybody listening, thank you. I'm listening to a TED Talk right now about, it's an archaeologist talking about halfway in, some of the interesting characteristics of human civilization, even the term civilization, and how it seems like there's clear evidence that for thousands of years we persisted in villages, that propagated technology really efficiently in a decentralized way. And that though history teaches us that we needed all these really yucky systems, that in order to drive the innovation that we have seen, we needed all these really, these empires of where there was huge disparities in social class and quality of life, and etc. And I think I see where he's going, and I think what he's going to do is make a case for decentralization, maybe unknowingly. We'll see. I tend to agree with all of that, or at least that interpretation. And I think that's where we're going. I think if you look at Twitter in 3 years' time, I'd love to see it just be an open source, decentralized protocol of the internet that works hard to mitigate censorship of any kind. And I listened to All In Pod this morning, where Elon described like how he'll handle free speech. And he said, I think what we'll do is we'll just adhere to whatever local law is and make it regional based on local law. And I think that's smart. I think that that's a way to just very quickly separate from that shitstorm of complexity. And that makes sense to me. But I think what will be better is if, as a species, we agree we need a perfect interconnect that's as uncensored as possible. And then we set up a minimal rule set that basically, we only need one rule, that there needs to be mutual respect from all participants with the content they share in the core principles: optimization of self, optimization of network, protection of the collective. Every cell is important. So if somebody's sharing content that doesn't adhere to those just sort of clean, simple principles, and it, if somebody's trying to organize action that violate those properties, that's where it gets censored. I think that's a way where we can retain the beauty of our variability. I think that solves the censorship problem. I think what we need to do is just set a base rule set that allows us to all kind of share ideas with complete freedom. And then the ones that get adopted or get propagated and incentivized because they support the net good of the collection, it just makes sense to me. Like in a purely evolutionary system, survival of the fittest, where you set it up around incentivizing people's state captures. If people put up things that are not very useful for the collective, they'll have no incentives. That'll be a poor state optimization, and so they won't make any revenues off of their royalty stream. So then it's a more abstract way of looking at it, I think, because think about it. If we want to build an army of Optimus robots that are smarter than we are, you either make something that's very dumb, that is not even parity with human compute and cognitive ability, which isn't very useful. So that's one approach. So for the most menial tasks, we'll probably do that. But then for all the other tasks, and all the other, hi there, morning. For all of the other, for the Optimus bots on Mars that are constructing a colony before humans get there, what if we could put the, or even, that's the thing, that network is going to be made up of sentients that are real-time renderings of what we are from our state captures. And they can be an extension of us. It's, like I said, parity plus in cognitive function. But it'll be really useful to think different ways so that the people that are working on a job are the right people who want to do the job, not because they're getting paid for, but because they find pleasure and fulfillment in executing it at their highest ability. I think that's where you can't just create one model that wants to do all that, at least not in the beginning. And there's going to be a lot of value in preserving all of that really interesting differentiation in all of our states, so we can build models that are set up for the right task, that really align well to the task. I don't know, just an idea. Motorcycle riding works better with hat on backwards.
Quick commentary on today's All-In podcast. Awesome as usual. I want to just call out, I want to push back against the sort of unanimous call that they made around SBF being the quote unquote like worst human of the year award. I was surprised actually that they kind of, it seemed like everybody agreed that SBF was the worst human ever. And that's alongside like Vladimir Putin, who I know Jason has strong opinions about. Or there's all, it's really interesting how much vitriol everyone has about Sam Bankman-Fried, Sam Bankman-Fraud, or Scam Bankman-Fraud. I kind of get it, but these guys, I'm really impressed with how they can sort of abstract away, second and third order consequences of actions and the way they can think through it, but they all kind of unanimously thought SBF was the worst person. And it's just, really being authentic here. Sam can go fuck off at this point, and I don't think he should get any of the money that he stole. But all of his internal incentives for, basically what he's designed his whole life around is either shrewdly and sort of cynically scamming people to get their money for personal gain, or actually believing all of the stuff he was preaching and thinking that he was the only one smart enough to actually execute on all of it and get it right. And I actually, from just the way I understand humans work, I think it was probably the second one. I think he actually believed, especially when you say he, I forget it, altruism, the whole thing. I mean, he had to at least read books about that to say that I subscribe to effective altruism. And I think that, sure, maybe the drug cocktail he was on or whatever allowed him to make decisions just like dictators callously make decisions for their national self-interest and are willing to do really horrible things that they justify. But that's just how a base human OS has some principles that where it's really hard to operate the way people like. I guess to do the study in time and care. How's a good way to say it? I really just think that guy's, all of his internal incentives were around sort of this story he told himself about how I'm really brilliant. I can see all these things and where our technology is going. I can figure out a way to make the most money off of it. And then he had so much success doing that with Bitcoin initially in Japan. And he raised all this capital, and then he was able to extend that by finding exploits in the system. And he justified it all with, I'm going to be the best at applying all this. And I can see how that builds into like a sickness. So, but here's the end of this is he's completely destroyed his reputation, and he's become the poster boy of, I almost feel like somebody like that should be paid a bug bounty, because there was all of this inertia forming in crypto. And I'm a believer in decentralized money and smart contracts, and I'm one of the largest proponents you'll find out there. But there was a cancer building in the community where centralized authorities like FTX and Binance and all these things, all these translators, these bridges to the fiat system that allowed you to onboard, transfer, basically, these exchanges effectively were a very necessary bridge to a whole new monetary system. And what we just learned is that they were using that control, or that position of power that's really important, as a sort of a translation of wealth from the old monetary system to the new monetary system. They were using all of the capital they were generating to capture more of what crypto is, and for whatever their purpose, finding ways to harness it to their own personal, for their own personal revenues. Basically, what they were doing, like FTX is the purest example of that corruption. FTX as an organization was using that position to create sort of a flywheel on corrosive behaviors of a centralized banking system, with just window dressing that made it look like it was crypto. Now, why I say Sam should probably get a bug bounty is now it forced, in a very public way, it made a public spectacle of how dysfunctional that behavior was. And it means we're now creating, all of the developers in the space and all of the thought leaders are all universally going, okay, we need to realign all of our effort around the core mission, which is decentralized, is DeFi. And that's a cleansing effect. Like, it's like we built, in order for this new monetary system to be trustworthy, before we can transition from the old monetary system that's super flawed, we have to test the new one in ways. We need to throw Sam Bankman-Fried's at it. And I think it's unhealthy to focus really on much of the psychology of an SBF. I think we needed hackers, be they white hat or black hat, to try and break the system before significant TVL gets migrated there. Or we're going to create structural problems in society. So it's a very vital function that bad actors like SBF, and I don't care at all what his motivations are. Now he has to deal with it. I think the right solution is take away all his money, say you have to start over again, and we're going to make a big public spectacle of what you did with resources last time. I don't even care about jail time. So I should pay taxes. So you're going to tax me now and the rest of society to pay for Sam's food and in a really inefficient incarceration system, and now force him to sit in a box for a while, and we're gonna waste a bunch of money and resources on litigation of the duration and all that. No, I think that's all just complete waste. If I was trying to optimize a system, I'd just go, thank you, cancerous opportunist, for pointing out a huge flaw that was developing in a really vital system and technology that we're building. Now, fuck off. That's what we should be doing as a species for that type of actor. So I think the whole premise of having a worst human is, my feedback for the All In Pod crew is I just throw out that category, because I think when you look carefully, worst humans are usually kind of in this bucket where they're just testing something really important that we needed to test. And markets create the incentives for there to always be one. If it wasn't Sam Bankman-Fried, it was going to be some other person. 100%, because the incentives were aligned such and the vulnerability had not yet been patched up, and or we hadn't built any defenses around that specific vulnerability. So it was just a question of time before an SBF-like actor attempted what he tried. Net gain for crypto, net gain for humanity, and our new monetary system. And I just think that's a much more productive way to view things, and wanted to call it out here. Follow up on that last segment. The reason I say specifically that SBF should fuck off is because of that famous tweet he had about Solana and how he'd buy Solana all day at $3 or whatever it was, and then you can all just fuck off. It seems appropriate. We should just tell him, thanks for the valuable lesson we all needed about how to protect crypto, and you can now fuck off. And finally, I want to add, I want to read out some text that I wrote down as I was talking to my dad. He called me. I was just went to a local restaurant, grabbed some breakfast, and I got headphones in talking to him, and then I'm realizing that as I'm trying to describe, so he's communicating to me the general dysfunction he's seeing all around him. He lives in a pretty remote location, and services are breaking down. The local schools are down to like 20% capacity of school buses because they can't find drivers. And he's saying there's all these weird problems developing that he sees all around in where he lives, because with like shipping delays, the cell phone coverage seems like it's suddenly getting worse. Everything's kind of in this weird state of decay, and he's calling it out. And so what I told him, and he was in the trucking industry professionally, and talking with his the guy he used to drive for, as a contractor, as that guy would describe the trucking industry right now and how hard it is to get drivers and how a lot of it's due to dysfunction around hours, like, and the limits on driver hours. And so I tried to explain for my dad kind of my thesis on the general dysfunction in society right now. And I want to tie this back to what is his name on Twitter. I gotta find him. I listened to a lot of his macro takes. He's a regular guest on Real Vision and on the macro circuit. Jim Bianco at Bianco Research. Jim has this thesis about we're not going back to, like, after COVID. He says there's sort of this, and I agree with this statement, there's this miscalculation on Wall Street and in probably just in the workforce, that we're going to return to normal. And he has this whole thesis around work from home and why it is, this is a new normal, and our consumer spending habits are changed for good. Consumer behaviors have been radically altered, and people have been conditioned not to want to go or to expect work from home. And I think he's really onto something, but I think it's bigger than that. And something I've noticed as just in myself and all of the people I interact with, I've noticed what at first seemed like a certain kind of madness, and now as I discover it, or as I look at it more carefully, I think, here's what I wrote. Summary of COVID. People realized their lives were not very substantial or substantive pre-COVID. The forced lock-in gave us a subsidized global sabbatical to all sit in our houses and be terrified. But we also were given the time as a species, for the first time ever, to just stop, breathe, yes, be scared, but then reflect on the value of how we spent our time pre-COVID. So I would say it's more complicated than just work from home or work in an office. I think that such a social experiment hasn't been conducted in modern times, post the Industrial Revolution. And now suddenly everyone, like as a species, we all stopped. And we were forced to look at what's really important in our lives. And I think that this isn't about a question of office conditions. I think it's a question about, I think many of us in our roles realized that there was no meaning. I certainly found that. I found that I was working for years on projects that would be mismanaged at the end. And then when we'd be at in a liquidity cycle that I didn't understand, and the global economy went risk off and lending got expensive, and it was downturn and downsize time, I kept finding myself in these programs that I dedicated all of my passion and my effort at making successful. I saw them just collectively thrown out, and people that I worked really hard to develop their careers and their understanding and their passion for what they were working on be summarily dismissed and just tossed aside callously. And it made, when I could see this coming last year, I saw it. I looked at the balance sheet of the company I was working for, and I knew that, like, it wasn't compatible with my ethics. Not only did I not find meaning in it, but I needed a rape shower after even supporting it. I had to get through a whole review cycle with a team of engineers and give them a total shit sandwich of raises, because there was no money for raises. And when I looked at what was happening in macro and began to understand it, I was like, oh, they're definitely going to fire all of us. And all of this thing that I worked really hard on for 3-4 years is just going to be chucked aside. So that is actually, so my response to that, I think, is very similar. I think a lot of people were kind of in that space. And what's happened is, as a species, we've gone, well, you just forced me to get really creative about how I can support myself. And you've shown me that there's almost no value in what I was doing before. So now I'm going to get really creative about finding ways to support myself, and I'm not going to go back and do that. And that's why we have ourselves right on the cusp of an 09-like mega recession. That's because we prolonged easy money for so long that this correction looks like it'll be more severe to me than 09, or at least on par. So, and then you couple with that all the dynamics of the fourth turning. If you understand just sort of the archetypes of the different, the millennials, the boomers, and the Gen Xers and the Zoomers, and you kind of, when you understand the framework of all of the times we live in and the cyclicality of it all, you realize that we're not going back, and it doesn't have to do with office space. It has to do with a massive shift in thinking that we all did at the same time. But this is kind of beautiful, because what it means is we're all no longer willing to do meaningless work. I think that's what's happening. And if you can afford not to, you're going, well, I don't need a new car. If I just don't buy a new car, I can subsidize, if I do a little less travel and I buy less meaningful or meaningless material goods, I don't have to go do that pointless job anymore that was soul-sucking. So all of the people that can afford to do that, the people that were on the cusp of retirement but couldn't, the boomers that were in that phase of life, they're not coming back because they can afford not to. And so this means you have this coupling of a very unhealthy economy when you look under the surface, and coupled with record employment numbers. Because as a species, we're giving corporate America and all of the other collective workforce entities, we're giving them the finger at every range of the pay scale and saying, I'm only going to come work if I have to. So that means you're going to see, you're seeing like what just happened at Twitter, where people, CEOs that are really, the powerful CEO is going to go and look at and see what Elon just did with Twitter and say, I can do something very similar here. And so I think you're going to find white collar work is about to just, there's going to be a mass surplus, because they're going to be the best at creatively sustaining a life that is more meaningful for themselves with, their accumulated wealth. And a very healthy other thing is at the bottom end of the pay spectrum, where there's these really labor intensive and repetitive type work is going to demand a higher wage, because everyone is less willing to do that kind of work for next to nothing. And we're all seeing that we don't need to buy meaningless shit to be happy. So that's why I would say that Jim Bianco was onto something with his thesis, but I think it's a lot bigger than he realizes. And the source of it and the implications are, I think that explains it in more depth. I will stop now. That's enough.